Welcome to the Socratic Club. For those of you who don't know, this is a graduate student organization. The purpose of it is, in the words of Socrates, to follow the argument wherever it leads and foster dialogue among different viewpoints through what I call TED-style talks. Today's speaker will be Professor Alan Fox. He is a professor of Asian and comparative philosophy and religion in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Delaware. He earned his PhD in religion from Temple University in 1988. He was a Fulbright Scholar in Taiwan from 1986 to 87, and he came to the university in 1990. He's won numerous awards. I could go through all of them, but I don't want to bore you too much. And he's agreed to talk a little bit about the practice of meditation, and then he's agreed to lead a small meditation among this intimate group. So I will now turn the time over to Professor Alan Fox.
Great. So this is, obviously a real intimate group, so I don't want to, I'm not going to prepare a lecture or something like that. But I did want to talk about, to begin with, just say a few words to contextualize what meditation is and how it works and so on and so forth. Are any of you, how experienced are you with meditation? Do you have any experience? None? Well, Brian? You must have a little bit. You? Yeah, a little bit. So the thing is that now in a traditional context, I think meditation is best understood. Well, let me put it this way. I've studied lots of different meditation systems. In every single one of them, in order to learn to meditate, you have to learn to concentrate first. And concentration is really about focusing the attention. So the thing about focusing the attention is when we talk about concentration, and this shows up, by the way, in the 8-step system of yoga that's associated with Patanjali, that most people know some pieces of, like the postures and the breathing and stuff. That's part of a larger system. But it all culminates in concentration and meditation and then bliss. So the concentration precedes the meditation. And it's all, especially given what we're going to do tonight, because it's just completely rudimentary, is it's all grounded in the body. Even Patanjali notices too that it's a body that's meditating. So that's why in the yogic systems there's a lot of emphasis on developing the body, strengthening the body, getting rid of the distractions that the body provides, and so on, so that you can sit for long periods of time in meditation. So in that system, concentration precedes meditation. So what's concentration? Well, first of all, when we talk about concentration, we could be talking about frozen orange juice concentrate, and it's the same meaning to some extent or another. To concentrate is to compress, is to focus or condense. Does that make sense? And so, of course, we're not talking about frozen orange juice here, we're talking about attention. And so the metaphor that's often used here is the metaphor of the third eye. This is, at least in Hindu forms of meditation, they talk about a third eye. Now sometimes, again, this is in some of the systems associated with like a kind of a yogic physiology of chakras and stuff. But even in the most general sense, the third eye represents the searchlight of attention or awareness. So that whatever you're aware of at any given moment is where the searchlight is focusing, that's your attention. Does that make sense? And so concentration has to do with how finely you can focus that attention, and literally to concentrate, to compress the field of attention, ideally in Hindu meditation, to a single point. What's interesting about Chinese meditation is that it's the opposite. The goal is to expand the field of attention to include everything. It's not clear how different that is in practice. The experience might even be the same. But in one, the model is expanding, and the other, the model is contracting. In Sanskrit, that's called ekachitta, one mind, one single-pointed awareness. So concentration is the ability to focus that awareness, like the third eye, learning to stare unblinkingly for long periods of time at a single object. Does that make sense? So concentration aids are going to be things like visualizing complicated diagrams and mandalas, or saying certain sounds and following their, the cycle of their resonance, or focusing on different parts of the body, especially internally, like the chakras and stuff, or breathing or something, or walking. I mean, there are all kinds of mindfulness exercises. And mindfulness in the Buddhist practice is the most rudimentary form of concentration. Mindfulness really just means to start to learn to pay attention, to be aware of what's going on around you. It's really just about paying attention. In general, mindfulness. So the opposite of mindfulness is obliviousness. So people who are oblivious just have, just don't seem to have a clue as to what's going on. Hi, Mom. What's going on around them. So as opposed to being oblivious, Buddhism, as a preliminary to meditation, recommends that we become mindful, which again means to kind of be aware of how you stick out into the world and how the world overlaps with you and how you overlap. The impact that you're having. When you think about people who are oblivious, you're talking about people who don't understand what the impact that they're having on the world around them. And so mindfulness is the opposite of that. But mindfulness, again, is a very general focusing of it, or a form of attention, whereas concentration is a more focused form of attention. So now you're really focusing that searchlight until it reaches that single beam. And then when we think about how that leads to meditation, the relationship between concentration and meditation, if you think about meditation, concentration as an eye, learning to stare unblinkingly for long periods of time at a single object, then meditation is when that eye turns around and watches itself, watching itself, watching itself. So meditation in that sense is really self-awareness. But self-awareness, not even awareness of a self, but awareness being aware of awareness itself, right? It's not awareness of a self. The self there is the reflexive self, which is like a self-cleaning oven that doesn't have a self, but it cleans itself. So the self-awareness that goes on is this awareness being aware of how awareness works. So it's completely reflexive. It's a loop. It's like staring into a mirror with a mirror on the other side, and it just goes on forever. It just replicates itself forever. So meditation is basically learning to, in that sense, focus the attention on the focusing of attention. And generally speaking, there's thousands and thousands of ways to meditate, and stages of meditation, and systems of meditation. So I'm not trying to overgeneralize here. But for instance, in Buddhism, there are two major kinds of meditations. One's called samatha, and the other are called vipassana meditations. The samatha meditations are calming meditations. And the idea is that there's all this static and noise and chatter going on in my head. Am I being too autobiographical here? Well, there's just a lot of noise in my head, and so in order to kind of tune into that signal, I've got to eliminate the static. So the calming meditations are about getting rid of the noise, getting rid of the static, letting the dust settle. Those are various metaphors that are used. And then the second part of the meditation, or the point of the meditation, is the vipassana, which is observation, paying attention to the way in which thoughts operate and where thoughts come from and how all thoughts are associated with thoughts of selfhood and where thoughts come and where thoughts go and how thoughts lead to other thoughts. And the problem is when you start paying attention to thought in that way, it's real easy to be watching the thoughts go by and then jump on a bandwagon and identify with a stream of thought. So it's like if you're late at night watching TV and you're just kind of flipping channels, randomly, and it's just, all kinds of goofy stuff going by, and all of a sudden, boom, the Love Boat. And for some reason you're stuck, you're paying attention, you're interested in these characters for some reason, and now you're going to watch this show till it's over. So, in other words, or you're watching the parade go by and then you jump on one of the floats. Because the idea of meditation, at least at preliminary levels, is just to watch that parade of thoughts go by. In the Hindu models, not the Buddhist models, the meditation is understood as a witness meditation. That is to say, what they call drashtir is, the drasht word means to observe in all viewpoints and perspectives and stuff. So a drashtir is a witness. And so the idea is that if we can learn to witness our experience as though from a distance, we could overcome this identification with this limited experience. So the idea in Hinduism is that the real me is much more than this. And this is an identification with this is limiting my experience. So the goal of meditation is to unlimit my experience by overcoming my identification with this. So the drashtir meditations, the witness meditations, are the ones that take a viewpoint outside of my experience and view it as not my experience, but somebody else's experience. That means to distance myself from that experience in some way. And so the idea is that if you distance yourself in that way, it becomes less compelling, right? Of course. So you stop caring about the characters and so. So in other words, guilty admission. So one way to understand this is when I first got out of college, I went to every slasher horror flick that came out for about 2 years. And this was, I'll date myself for anybody who cares, this was like the original Halloween, original Fright Night, stuff like that, right? So, and then after, don't ask me why, after about 2 years I had an epiphany and never went back. And the epiphany was that in every single one of those movies, there is a scene where a young girl is home alone, 16-year-old girl, home alone. She hears a noise outside, and she walks outside in her panties, leaves the door open behind her, and she's walking down this dark pathway yelling, "Who's there? Who's there?" And I'm, if that were me, first of all, now I'm trained in the martial arts, I would be locking the door and calling 911. I'm not walking outside in my panties, I'll tell you that right now. So once I realized that, then it's like that is the only thing scary about that is how stupid that is. That anybody could possibly be that stupid. So once I could no longer identify with that character, it no longer became even interesting, not much less frightening. I mean, it's the same thing with humor, to be honest with you, with me. If it's that stupid, it's not even funny. I can't identify with it. It's just not interesting to me. So the drashtir meditation is that kind of de-identification, that decathexis, so that you disassociate yourself and realize that that's not you, and what happens to that doesn't matter. Because again, what happens to this, to be honest with you, not to make too fine a point of it, but this is going to die, this is rotting even as we speak, and so the more I identify with this, the more disappointed I'm going to be, the more frustration and pain I'm going to experience. The goal being, if I could overcome identification with this and identify with more enduring aspects of my personality, then theoretically I could spare myself a lot of unnecessary pain. Does that make sense? So the goal of meditation there is to, and this is true for Buddhism too, to some extent, is to stop identifying with this, to stop thinking this is me. The difference between Buddhist and Hindu meditations is that Buddhism denies that there's any self at all, so that to de-identify with this is to overcome the concept of selfhood entirely. In Hinduism, the goal is to de-identify with this in order to identify with a more fundamental self, a truer, more permanent self. Does that make sense? Problems, stop. Problems or questions so far? Anything I've said so far? Problems or questions? Yeah. What's your name?
I just wanted to.
What's your name?
Randy Strauss.
Randy.
I just wanted to talk about one qualification. Like, as you were talking about how Hinduism, and yeah, you clarified that point, but I just wanted to make sure that Hinduism isn't necessarily looking outside yourself. It's trying to find more of a fundamental self.
Yeah, fundamental
Okay,
self.
okay,
Yeah,
right,
exactly. Well, and actually in Hinduism, there's an identification of the microcosm with the macrocosm. So in fact, it's the same thing. What's fundamentally real about everything out there is also what's fundamentally real about you. And that's why in Hindu yoga, Hindu meditation, that the highest forms of attainment are expressed in a phrase, tat tvam asi, which means that thou art. So in other words, the idea is that at the highest states of attainment, when you look in somebody else's eyes, you see yourself. You understand? So that, because everybody's the self, and the self
Okay,
is
right.
everywhere.
Right, so that's the identification with the self.
Right.
Although it's more fundamental.
Well, again, individual self versus de-identification with this.
Okay, right, and then,
Right.
yeah, exactly, so with the body.
Because I deliberately didn't say this is myself. The problem is that I think this is. And so that's why I suffer.
Right.
And the goal is to identify with a more fundamental self, right? And that fundamental self, the more fundamental it is, the more comprehensive it is too. The more it's shared by everybody. So at least in some of these systems, there's just the self. It's not like yourself and myself.
Right.
It's just the self, and it expresses itself through all these different forms. Other problems or questions? Yeah.
So the point of meditation is to transcend the body?
The point of meditation really is to learn to focus the attention.
Why?
For different systems, for different reasons, but generally in order to overcome suffering. It's not so much to, and of course suffering being associated with identification with the body. But it's not just to de-identify with the body, because who cares? Why do we need to do that? The problem is again, the more I identify with this, the more, at least this is the typical model, the more I suffer. And in these models, suffering is a problem. And I'm not being sarcastic, because again, if you, in these models, suffering is a problem. If you don't think suffering is a problem, don't be a Hindu or a Buddhist, be a Christian or a Jew. Because again, in those models, suffering means something different. I mean, for Jews, suffering is the way God teaches people things, and it's how we distinguish suffering from joy, and so on and so forth. But, and in Christianity, suffering is salvific. I mean, Jesus saves through suffering. So, obviously, suffering means different things in different traditions. These traditions are the ones that think that suffering is the problem, at least real existential suffering, not paper-cut suffering. But, and that can be resolved through, in some sense, through radically reorganizing our concept of our own selfhood. Because that's what causes us pain, is a narrow view of our own selfhood, or a rigid view of our own selfhood, I think would be another way of looking at it. Problems or questions? You okay there? I wasn't sure if that arm was up. I can't see your arm. So, all right. So, so the other thing about meditation, when we talk about samatha and vipassana, again. So in other words, in the Hindu model, the goal is to identify with the true self, to overcome all this false identification, all this illusion, and realize what you really are. Wake up from the dream, so to speak. In Buddhist meditation, again, the goal is more to analyze why we think we're a self. Where does that thought of selfhood come from? So it's kind of archaeologically excavating into the consciousness and finding out where that thought of selfhood first arises. And so the idea then is that in Buddhist meditation, the relaxation, the samatha meditations kind of calm everything so that you can look and clearly analyze and find where that thought of selfhood first arises, because it's like breaking a habit, the habit of thinking of yourself as a self, right? Which it's a habit we all have. It's not just that. So the habit we have is that with every thought we have, every move we make, every breath we take. Stop me before I hurt somebody. Every thought is associated with another thought, which is that this is my thought, this is me thinking this thought, I am thinking this thought. So that thought of me is tacked onto, kind of piggybacks on every other thought. That's the bad habit. And so in that sense, meditation is learning how to break the habit of thinking of yourself as a self. And you do that by archaeologically looking deeper and deeper to where that thought first arises. The same way if I was going to try to quit smoking, if I was a chain smoker, I wouldn't just go cold turkey, because then I would find some other way to satisfy that urge. You've got to eliminate the urge. You can't just eliminate the behavior, because then I'll gain 50 pounds or get addicted to heroin, right? So the fact is that little by little I can eliminate the habit by gradually, every time I realize I'm smoking a cigarette, I put it out, and then every time eventually, when I go to light it, I'm going to remember, and I stop, and then before I light the match, I remember, and then before I pick up the cigarette, I remember, until I'm getting deeper and deeper and closer to where that thought of smoking the cigarette first arises, right? And then I'm not even reaching for the cigarette. So the same thing with the thought of selfhood. I can get deeper and deeper and closer to where that thought of selfhood first arises, and then I don't think that way anymore. overcome that illusion of selfhood, of thinking of myself as some kind of individual, permanent entity. Yeah.
So my only issue that I've ever had with that concept of, their concept of self, which is like no self, is that it seems to me that we completely dismiss the like idiosyncrasies or like the uniqueness.
No, okay, so it's not, so the dismissal of selfhood is not the dismissal of uniqueness. It's the dismissal of individuality in this, of discrete individuality. In other words, what's being denied is a permanent self. There's no question that you are different than Molly.
Okay.
But the question is, are you the same as Randy was a moment ago?
Okay, yeah, and like, I understand.
So if you're not the same Randy that you were a moment ago, then even though I can tell the difference between the two of you, you're different, but you're not the same as you. You're different than you.
But if I'm different than me, then like how can like the thing?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Okay, so for instance, if I'm not me, I'm anticipating your question. Maybe I'm jumping on it, but I'm anticipating your question. If I'm not me, then why am I here talking to you? I didn't earn the PhD.
Yeah, that's not what I was going to say.
Well, I mean, or why am I? No, I don't mean it in a personal sense. Or why am I able to drive? I didn't earn. If I'm not myself, then I didn't get a driver's license. I didn't get a PhD. So why am I allowed to do all those things? And the answer is that I'm not myself because from moment to moment, I am being caused by lots of things. I'm changing constantly from moment to moment. And that change is being driven by lots of things. You are right now causing me to be who I am right now. So to some extent, I am caused by you. And so you and I overlap to some extent. But there is still a distinguishable difference between you and I, which is that I am way more caused by the previous instance of me than I am caused by the previous instance of you. I am way more caused. So the previous instance of Alan had way bigger effect on the current instance of Alan than the previous instance of Randy. So I am not me, but I'm more me than you are. And I'm more me than I am you. So the problem with me and you is when we dichotomize it in that way. Here the emphasis is on the fact that there's just a lot of overlapping going on. You want to say you and me, for what purpose? I mean, if we want to talk about who's human in this room, nobody has to not put their hand up, right? We don't have to make distinctions between us. If we want to talk about who's male, then we can make distinctions. If we want to talk about who's over a certain age, then we can make other distinctions. You understand what I'm saying? But unless we're making certain decisions, where the actual line is between you and me is impossible to draw. That's what it means to repudiate the concept of selfhood. It's not continuity that's being denied. You are a continuous stream of causal continuity. What's being denied is permanence. Does that make sense? You're not exactly the same as you were. And if they're not the same as you were, then in what sense are you yourself? It's like one of my favorite jugglers holds up a hatchet and he says, this is the very hatchet that George Washington used to chop down the cherry tree, except that the handle has been replaced, and so has the head. Well, I mean, like, what's the same, if everything's changed about it, then in what sense is it itself? Right? In what sense is it the same thing? But the other example I'd like to give is the rock band Yes, which went through so many formulations and originally had 6 guys in it, and one by one they left the band and were replaced until it was entirely 6 other guys, and then they were still going around playing Yes songs on the oldies tours. And then the original Yes wanted to come out of retirement because you can make more in a weekend than they made in their whole career. But they couldn't call themselves Yes because there was already a Yes. And I thought they should have called themselves the No because the Who was taken. But they ended up calling themselves just by the names of the members of the band and the question is, who's the real Who? I mean, who's the real Yes? I mean, now I'm really confused. But you understand what I'm saying? If it changes that slowly, in what sense is it the same? And think about it. Everything you know about yourself is changing constantly. Everything, I mean, how do you know you're you? Well, I know I'm me because I look like me, but I don't look exactly like the me I looked like yesterday, and I really don't even look like the me that was that, got up for work this morning, and so on. So we're constantly changing. We're sloughing off skin cells as we speak, and the fact is we're changing constantly. The earliest Buddhist meditations were simply focusing on that fact, visualizing your body rotting in the grave, or literally, and I'm not making this up, visualizing your body as a bag of pus and shit. And the idea is that, you're not supposed to think about that all the time, but at least once in a while you've got to realize that, yeah, you are actually also, whatever else you are, whatever wonderful human beings you are also bags of pus and shit. You may be living and growing, but you're also dying and rotting even as we speak. But we don't want to face that stuff. So meditation, the earliest Buddhist meditations were just like, grimly facing the messy facts of embodiment. Does that make sense? So, so again, the point being that the only reason we do everything about us, our embodiment is changing all the time. Your personality, if you identify yourself in terms of your personality, well, your personality's changed even in the half an hour that we've been talking here, right? Your emotions have ranged from depression to despair, I'm sure. So, for instance, and your, whatever ideas have gone through your head or whatever, that's changed you. It's, your personality has gone through many changes. How else do you know you're you? By people saying you're you. You walk in the room and people go, "Hi, Brian. Hi, Molly. Hi, Randy," and so on. It's like, well, I must be me. Everybody's calling me me. People treat me like me. That confirms that I'm me. And memory, I remember being me. I remember getting lost at the World's Fair 3 times in 19... and my parents having to announce my name over the loudspeaker. What a simpler time. But anyway, the point is that that must have been me because I remember that being me. But listen, all those things I just mentioned, physical appearance, reactions of others, personality, memories, they're all changing all the time, right? Your physical appearance is changing all the time. Your personality has changed, as we said, even as we've been sitting here. Your memories, if y'all, I'm sure y'all remember it was great to be a kid, right? But what were you thinking the whole time you were a kid? I can't wait to grow up. So, we edit our memories and we just, block out all the bad parts. That changes all the time. And then reactions of others. Again, honestly, I'm standing here talking to you guys. Every single one of you is listening to me. In about, half an hour or so, I'm going to go home. Nobody listens to me at home. So, am I a completely different person at home than I am here? It's hard. If I am, then that radicalizes our concept of selfhood.
So would Buddhist philosophy, and I only say this because I haven't heard of it in what I've studied of it, would they contend that there is a unique combination, either if it's just organization that changed over time?
Yes, absolutely. It's called the skandhas,
okay.
The aggregates. There are 5 factors that contribute to what we're seeing, the personality that's right here.
And that sort of conglomerate is the self-preserved over time?
Well,
it's
continuous over time.
Right,
it's causally
and it's a substance that's continuous over time.
Substance is a tough word to use. Causal continuity.
Okay, exactly.
Again, you want to attribute substance to that, that's another kettle of fish. Okay? What were you saying?
Sorry, bundle theory, is that kind of the...
It's kind of like, aggregates,
okay.
bundles, that's right.
Okay. I'm thinking
who
like
says that?
Hume, yeah,
right. So
yeah.
exactly, Hume's model is very
Okay.
compatible with this,
Okay.
because again, Hume is also saying that we infer lots of things from that. But the point is that it's like, the best example I use, and again, I don't know if anybody, apparently they're making a real life movie out of this, but do you remember Captain Planet at all? From when you were kids?
Are they
Captain Planet, they're making a live action movie with Don Cheadle as Captain Planet, but he was this environmental superhero on Turner TV, and the way it worked was there are these 5 kids that had these power rings, and when their power beams converged, they generated this composite personality called Captain Planet. That's how the Buddhists understand the formation of the personality. When these 5 skandhas coalesce like the fingers form a fist, then the fist is present. But it doesn't make sense to speak of a fist that comes and goes. It's just when we organize the fingers in a certain way, we call it a fist. And when the factors are arranged in a certain way, we call it a personality. But it's not like personality comes into existence or ceases to be. Does that make sense? And it's changing all the time as the relations. And even those factors are caused by other factors and caused by, and everything's caused by everything else simultaneously.
So the identification,
all forms of identification.
So having your sort of perception of the self dissolve, is the goal to understand that you're part of nothingness, or is the goal to get to that?
Well, that depends now. In the context that I've just described, we're talking about Buddhism. The goal of Buddhism is very simple, to eliminate suffering.
Okay.
The suffering is caused by clinging to the concept of a permanent self. Because you know what? I don't want to be the one to break the news to you, but you are going to die. How about those ravens, huh? Just trying to change the mood here a little bit. You understand what I'm saying? So, but, you know, the fact is, the more you are attached to the idea of a permanent self, the more you're doomed to be disappointed. So Buddhism is really about the whole point of everything in Buddhism is to eliminate suffering. So all the meditation, all the theories, all the practice, everything is really just about eliminating suffering. And that justifies it, you know. But suffering, again, in the existential sense, not in the paper cut sense. Existential suffering, again, in that sense, is a threat to your concept of your own permanence, right? It's like the question of who am I? That's an existential panic, you know, like let's say all your life you wanted to be a doctor and then you didn't get into medical school. I mean, that challenge to your concept of selfhood, you know, pulls the rug out from you. It's very disorienting, painful. That kind of pain is what we're talking about. Because, you know, you're not who you think you are. No matter who you think you are, that's not who you are, because that's who you were. That's maybe who you were a moment ago. Problems or questions? All right, well then I just want, so if it's okay, I just want to lead you through just a very basic kind of somatic kind of meditation. It's going to be very somatic, very much in the body, but it's about mindfulness, it's about paying attention to things. But to start, we want to stand up and move the body a little bit, because we want to innervate things a little bit, get the blood moving, so you can, because I think generally speaking, it's a lot easier to pay attention to the body when you've just moved it. This is why, again, most yoga systems, yoga is meditation. I mean, it's not so much about physically getting into a posture as it is paying attention to what's going on when you're in the posture. That's where it really becomes yoga. So the first thing we want to do is just to loosen up. So we're going to just kind of work our way down the spine just by rolling the head a little bit, not too far back, but just roll the head around a little bit just to loosen up the neck. And try to keep your shoulders back if you can. Don't hurt yourself. And by the way, if any of this hurts, stop, okay? Because I'm not a doctor, I just play one on TV, okay? So don't do anything that hurts. And roll it the other way. Make sure you go in both directions.
I thought you were a doctor.
Not that kind of doctor. Anyway, and then, so now roll the shoulders forward. And try to make as big circles as you can with the shoulders. All the way back, all the way up, all the way forward, all the way down. And nice and slow. You're not trying to hurt yourself, you're just trying to loosen things up a little bit. And then go the other way too with that. Okay, now you might want to just spread apart so you're not like arm width from people. Because I just want you to kind of stick your arm out and just kind of twist your spine a little bit if you can. Try to, you know, again, don't hurt yourself, because this, you know, if you're not used to this, you could hurt yourself. But you want to especially try to be honest with you, try to get some twist to your lumbar spine, which is down here at the base of the spine. And so what you want to do is go around, but then kind of just keep turning your head around a little bit, and that'll wring your spine out a little bit, you know. But just try to stay loose. All right, and then what you want to do is just roll the wrists both directions. And shake them off lightly like you're shaking water off of them. Okay, and then you might, if you need to lean on something or whatever, but you want to kind of also kind of roll the knee, just rotate the knee a little bit. And then back in the other direction. And the same thing with the foot. And then the other side too. All right, now you can either sit down, or you can, if you're comfortable laying down, if you want to, you can lay down, or you can sit down. What we want to do is sit down with your spine as straight as you can, and you want, just to be clear, you want as much as possible, you want your shoulders to be over your hips if you're sitting. If you're laying down, I'll explain that to you too. But if you're sitting, you want your shoulders as much as possible to be over your hips, and your ears to be in line with your shoulders, so your head's kind of pulled back a little bit. It might feel a little awkward, because even at your age, and I'm not being condescending here, you've already started to hunch your posture. That's the old man posture. And you see those guys drive. Those guys, it's me driving. But the point is, so that's good. It might already feel like you're pulling your shoulders back a little bit just to get into the proper alignment. But that's what you want to do. If you're sitting, then you want to keep, or if you're laying, your palms should be up lightly on your thighs if you're sitting down, right? And close your eyes. And the first thing you want to do is just focus on the breathing, okay? And just pay attention to how you are breathing. You're not necessarily trying to breathe in any particular way, but just notice how you're breathing. Are you breathing through your mouth or your nose? Is it coming in through one nostril or the other? Is it warmer on the way in or the way out? Just pay attention. Is it smooth or rough? As you pay attention, you may find that the breath starts to deepen. And you just let that happen. Increasingly, you want to kind of see your diaphragm as a bag that opens up as it descends. So you fill up with gas like a balloon. Just relax the breathing. Now you want to try to imagine a point at the very crown of your head, the very top of the head, just a single point. Focus all on that one point. Like a light is shining out of it towards the sky. And then that point is going to start to spread out over your scalp. Gradually spread out over your scalp, down to your ears, over your forehead. And everywhere that light spreads, you want to feel like a glow there. It's like a gas that's moving and stimulating everywhere it goes. And it flows down over your forehead and into your eyes. Tend to accumulate a lot of tension in the eyes. Let them relax. They're just floating in pools. Expand outward from the temples. Create space inside your head. Let it flow down over your cheeks, your jaw. A lot of tension in the jaw. And the neck. Relax the neck. It's like you have a steel plate over your collar. Just relax that, soften up. Breathe into it. So that's where you're sending the breath. And that gas is just flowing down and illuminating everything. Down over the back of the neck and into the shoulders. Collarbone, down to the shoulder blades, out the arms and down the arms, to the elbows. Feel that start to slowly spread through the elbows. There's a lot of congestion in the elbows. Let it flow smoothly. Don't force it. out the wrists. Also tends to be lots of congestion in the wrists. Just let it flow, and then out your palms and out your fingertips. Just glowing out the fingertips, just pouring out the fingertips. And while that's happening, feel it flowing down the trunk, the top of the back, chest, the breastbone, sternum. The ribs are opening up. Don't squeeze your internal organs. Let them open up. Give them space. Saturate them with this light. Flows down the spine, down the stomach, down to the base of the spine, the sacrum. Feel it spread out over the buttocks. Spread outward. Spread out as you sit. And it's going to translate now through the hips, and into the femurs, into the thighs. Feel that continue to flow through the knees. And again, there's congestion at the joints. Notice that. And just breathe through it. Send the breath there. Down the calves. The ankles. Lots of problems with the ankles. Open up space. Lengthen the foot. Try to stretch out the arch of your foot just gently, and let that energy now flow out the toes. You're pouring out of your fingers and your toes. It's shooting out your temples, shooting out the top of your head. Whole body is made of light. Just breathe into that. Feel the whole body breathing. Yourself drifting off, just remember where you are, what you're doing. There's a line of energy from your sacrum up to the crown of your head. That's you. You are nothing but that line from your sacrum to the top of your head, shooting out the top of your head. The deeper you go, the more you want to try to remember, set this state of mind. Find some landmarks. Make it easier to get back. Maybe think of a color or a sound. Connected to God through your head. And you're connected to the earth through your spine. Feel those two connections. try to take some timed breaths. Try to breathe in gently and gradually, slowly. Fill the lungs, but start by extending the diaphragm downward. Let the whole thing expand. Let it open up into the top of the lungs, into the collarbone. And then relax. There's plenty of time to breathe. All the time in the world. All the air you need. It's not just air you're breathing in. It's that glowing gas. It fills you up. It makes you lighter. Start to come back into the body now. Start to pay attention to how you're sitting, how your feet are on the floor. At some point you may want to wiggle your fingers or toes. Just be aware of how everything radiates out to the extremities. Try to be, as we transition, you want that transition to be smooth. The point of meditation is to be able to take this with you to the next step. So, it's not a sharp transition. Slowly bring your consciousness back to the room, to where you are, to the people around you. There's a lot of energy in the room. You can absorb it from the people around you. Try to feel that. At your own pace, you can bring yourself back. When you're done, you open your eyes. Gently and slowly. Bring your arms over your head and stretch a little bit, but not too much. You don't want to make yourself dizzy, because that could easily happen. Just get the blood flowing again. Get the chi back up into the head. So, questions, problems, observations. I mean, we didn't do that for very long. It was about 15 minutes or so. But, if you do that for 15 minutes a day, it'll make a massive difference in your ability to concentrate, in your complexion, and your bowel movements. Can I get more specific? I mean, really, just that kind of systematic 15 minutes a day, it's all it takes, really. More would be better. I saw something on, maybe you've seen it too, on Facebook. According to Zen Buddhism, you're supposed to meditate for 20 minutes a day unless you're too busy, in which case you should meditate for an hour. Because that's the whole point. You really have 20 minutes in your day, or 15, or even 5, but that's it. And, but of course, it's different. What was interesting about this group, maybe it was because we were all sitting up, but is that usually somebody falls asleep. And that's okay too. Somebody starts to snore or something, But, meditation is not about sleeping. Sleeping is about losing consciousness, and meditation is about, maintaining consciousness during relaxation, So if you do fall asleep once in a while during meditation, that's not a problem, that's okay. If you're falling asleep all the time during meditation, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it at the wrong time of day, or you're not getting enough exercise, to stay awake during meditation and so on. But you can see why, even at this level, you can't meditate without the body cooperating, because you can see the difficulties you have just trying to sit still. Problems or questions?
So the relationship of this type of meditation with yoga like
This is a very
standards?
preliminary samatha relaxation meditation. Again, this is what everything else comes from. But it starts with focusing attention to the different parts of the body and being able to then to master how that attention works. And then you're able to do things like suspend the heartbeat, or, you know what I mean, or withdraw the senses, so you're not, you know what I mean, because your concentration is so intense. And you're able to, you know, the mind is often described as like this dragon or something, and the idea is to ride the dragon, to tame the dragon, you know, because, you know, that's what makes us unhappy, is that our thoughts are out of control. You know, think about the moments that you don't have to get autobiographical or anything, but your worst moments, you know, it's like your mind is racing. You know, those are the moments when it would be nice if you had some training in how to you know, bring that under control.
And that's when you were saying, think about something that will bring you back.
Well, that's right.
The color and the sound. I was listening to the clock.
There you go.
How the tick is a lot more complex.
Has a
than
lot of
just
sound.
the
There you
tick.
go. So that's a fine meditation, is set a metronome or a clock and break down the tick into its various sound components, you know. That's mindfulness. That's paying attention. And that pays out throughout meditation. I mean, mindfulness and learning to attend, focus the mind where you want it to be, that kind of discipline is the basis of all meditation. You can't learn to meditate unless you can learn to do that. Yeah.
So is the practical idea overall, assuming, you know, you are a master at meditation, is...
Which I'm not.
Okay, I'm assuming you do meditate though.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so, you know, post-meditation, there is no noise or...
Miller time!
There is no noise. Damn it. There is no noise or clutter, as you mentioned. Is that...
Well,
is
the idea is that as
so
much
the day-to-day...
Yeah, I mean, it calms it down.
Because for me personally, I'm all, you know,
Yeah.
I could be in class, but I'm like, oh, what am I going to do later? And this
Of
and that,
course.
and,
Right.
you know.
And you can see when you're multitasking like that, you have fewer resources. You know, in the old days, some of you might remember when Windows first came out, you know, if you had 3 windows open at once, you got the blue screen of death because system resources were depleted. You know, you have too many things going on at the same time, you're not able to give any attention to any of them. So partly, in fact, one of the major metaphors of yoga is learning how to concentrate completely on one thing.
Right, okay.
And that makes you infinitely more effective at everything.
Sure.
You know, that should be obvious, you know, to anybody who's ever danced or played music or done a sport, you know, or anything. The more you're able to concentrate, the better you're going to be.
Is that when you lose the self? That's also, I guess, part of the idea.
Well, now, you know, again, now the reason I'm hesitating here is because, you know, it's not clear to me whether that goal of losing the self, whether that's the only reasonable goal.
Right.
Because again, the fact is that whether you ever accomplish any of that or not, 15 minutes of meditation a day will make you a happier person. You know, it'll make you more effective and more efficient and more calm and a better friend and a better lover and a better, you know, whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're just going to be a better person. So it's whether or not it ever leads to some final liberation and nirvana, which might be a carrot on a stick. You know, who knows if that ever existed. The fact is, you may not ever get perfect, but you'll definitely going to get better. You know, they lied to you. Practice does not make perfect, but practice definitely makes better. And so, you know, that whether you ever get perfect, there's still lots of room to get better. You know, to be less uptight about things, less stressed out all the time, and even more effective and efficient. Yeah.
For me, my big problem in life is dealing with people.
Yeah, I hate people.
I just don't like people.
Yeah, I hate them. Well, I actually agree 100%. I mean, I love people one-on-one. But you get them in more than about this size of a group, and you know they start to act really ugly. They get stupid.
And my brain goes crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like you're
Yeah, just
describing.
all the time. Yeah,
It's just,
right.
It's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I would love, yes, just
So-
to hone in on
How,
right.
and I've been trying to meditate, but
Mhm.
I'm not finding that necessarily.
Well, you know, there are lots of different kinds of meditations. What sounds like what you need is what's called metta, M-E-T-T-A, which is like loving kindness.
Oh,
You understand what I mean? You can see, I
I
don't
was
do
afraid of
that.
that.
I'll stick with Judaism. I can hate the people I don't like, as long as they're free.
Okay.
But you understand what I'm saying is that, the point of it is to actually picture the people, because you know what the fact is? Part of the analysis of metta meditations is usually to realize that the things that you hate about other people are the things that you hate most about yourself. So, it's the same excision. It hurts to acknowledge that, but it's not gonna happen if you don't do that.
So I've been doing a compassion meditation
Mhm.
for 15 minutes,
Mhm.
and then into 45 I do other things.
Mhm.
But I've noticed there's a lot of research that's been done on
Yes.
compassion meditation, but it seems to improve one's health.
Yeah.
And
Oh, there's increasing body of data on meditation. Physiological, neurological data on meditation, and attitude, psychological data, and it's so obvious that there's a benefit. I mean, across the system, throughout the organism. And, but not everybody sees the value of that. I mean, but it's like saying, of course you should quit smoking and eat well. Well, of course I should, but, I don't smoke, but I don't eat as well as I should, and I eat better than most, to be honest with you. So, but most people just because it's good for you doesn't mean you'll do it. There's a lot of habit involved in all of this. The best advice I ever got about meditation was if you sit in meditation, you shouldn't expect anything to happen. Right? Because if you're expecting something to happen, you got the wrong attitude. You're supposed to be watching what does happen, not expecting something to happen. Yeah.
So you used kind of the imagery a lot. You were, the gas and the light and all that.
I'm really into imagery.
Okay, yeah.
Everything's a metaphor.
So within
Metaphors be with you.
Get me. So when learning right? So we're learning how to meditate. Well, okay. So learning.
Yeah, we learned something.
Right. So learning from other sources. What are some other techniques that are used?
Oh well, I mean, a lot of breathing.
Okay.
A lot of chanting, a lot of specific body positions that require a lot of attention. Mudras are popular. Mudras are like finger positions that require an awful lot of attention to sustain.
Okay.
Especially like a very simple mudra, which might seem really simple, is to keep the fingertips barely touching so that you could they're touching, but a piece of paper would slip through them or something. It's like that close attention, or like you're holding an eggshell between your fingers or something. Mudras are very, good mechanisms. Sound, chants and stuff like that are also very powerful.
Mantras, is that the
mantra?
Aum and
Sure.
Yeah.
And the idea is, again, like you said, you can hear the sound of the tick unpack.
Mhm.
You do the sound, and you can hear it resonate throughout the whole organism if you do the sounds right. You become, the sound really takes on, it really kind of fills the whole. At the right kind of sound, it really feels like you're all sound.
I think it's cool that she was like all about the tick,
Yeah.
what was going on, and I didn't hear it at all.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, obviously that's the thing about, you can definitely zone out on things. That's pratyahara. In the yogic system, that's sensory withdrawal. By paying so close attention to something inside, you tune out everything that's going on outside. So the idea is you should be able to meditate in, a crowded, in the middle of a party, and not hear. It's Tommy, can you hear me? Willed autism, willed, refusal, willed denial of sensory input. It's like, when you stare at something so long, everything else starts to fade away. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
So
You took class with me, right?
Yeah.
What's your name again?
Lauren,
Lauren, right.
is there an idea that with increased practice, you'll be able to kind of reach that relaxed state in a faster amount of time?
Yeah.
Perhaps in a less ideal.
Absolutely, and that's why I said associate some kind of trigger. The more you do that, then you sit down in an exam and you
Right.
think of the color blue, and whew.
Where typically if you weren't practiced at all, it'd be impossible.
Yeah, exactly right. Your mind starts racing and all that kind of stuff. But if you train yourself to do this state, and then you associate with a trigger, then you can activate that anytime. And again, you do go into it faster and faster. It doesn't take that long to do it. The more you do it, like anything else, it becomes second nature. It's like learning to walk. I mean, you didn't, you know, except that it happened all by itself, right? You just kept getting up and walking. And you didn't get discouraged by the fact that you fell down. Because the judgmental, giving yourself shit when you get off the track, that's exactly the judgmental ego attitude that you're trying to overcome.
Right.
So that's just counterproductive. Okay. All right, well, then as the Buddha said in his dying words, work out your own salvation with diligence. All right, good, thanks for coming. No, don't do that, don't do that.
Okay.
Okay, good, thanks. Oh, no. All right, good, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sure
thank
thing.
you.